So in this video I want to do something a little different, and I'll share my thoughts on the new stat blocks that Wizards of the Coast are going to be using for 5e monsters going forward. It's something we've seen a bit of testing out, where they've tried out a few different things in previous book releases, and they seem to have settled on something now, which they released a few weeks ago in an article on Wizards of the Coast, and which I want to go over today because I of course have some opinions on it. So if you don't know, my name is J.A. Valeur and I'm a content creator for 5e. I've been creating DM's resources for 5e for several years, and I also run a Patreon over at patreon.com/Eventyr, where we put out weekly encounters, and these encounters of course include monsters. So the topic of how we design and also read stat blocks is something that is very important to me, and also something that I haven't always been impressed with how Wizards of the Coast do. So in this new updated way to make monster stat blocks in 5e, there is definitely some good elements, or there are definitely some good elements, but there are unfortunately also some stuff that I'm not really happy with. So the first thing we're told is that monster types will from now on be capitalized, which just means that humanoid will have a large H, giant will have a large G, and so on, and that seems to apply both to the monster stat block, but also how monsters are referenced in various adventures and so on. So I think this is a good change. I don't really care about it in the stat block, but having it clearly defined what type of creature a creature is when you're reading prose or semi-prose in an adventure, for example, can be hugely beneficial, and it's also something that we, when we're publishing stuff on the DM's Guild or on a Patreon, will be doing going forward, or try to do at least. Next up we have alignment, which is something that Wizards of the Coast hasn't really put an emphasis on in 5th edition to begin with, and for a period here they also completely scrapped alignment. There was this controversy about why are dark elves always evil, and why are these creatures always good, does an orc have to be evil, and so on, which led them to scrap alignment entirely. Well, the solution that they've come to now is that they want to do clear alignments for named NPCs, so NPCs that have a personality or has a personality, and they want to do usually or typically for creatures that will typically have that sort of alignments. That could be the orc that is typically evil, for example. I'm not sure that they will apply that to orcs. They may just get the any alignment treatment, which is what humanoids are getting. So if you have a bandit from now on, I'm sure that it'll be any alignment, because you can be a chaotic good creature with the bandit stat block, I assume. So I think this change is good. I like it. There's not anything really wrong with it. I think that giving named NPCs alignment is a good way for the DM to quickly assess, okay, this is an evil character when they're playing at the table, so I think that's fine. They typically gets around the controversy by saying, of course, not every orc is evil, even if most of them are, and then leaving everything else up to the DM is completely fine, because if you're just grabbing the bandit stat block, you either know what alignment it is, or it maybe doesn't matter that much. So yeah, I think that's a good change, and I like that they're going this way with it. Then they're introducing something called tags, which are druid, cleric, warlock, stuff you can prop on an NPC or creature that defines what they are beyond their immediate creature type. Now, I don't have a big opinion on this, because I don't really see it mattering that much. If an NPC is a druid, I would just let them use an item for a druid, which is what they sort of point out as an example here. So it's not something that I think is a huge benefit, and I don't think it looks particularly pretty in the stat block, and I could fear that we get some sort of tag overflow where every creature has 9 tags all of a sudden, because we have to tag everything, and then the rules reference tags, and it can be messy, but we're not there yet, and that may not happen. That depends on how they use it. Then they're also putting the proficiency bonus in the stat block, and this is something you've been doing for a while. It's something we've been doing for a while. It just makes sense. It's a good change. I like it, and they found a spot for it where it doesn't make the stat block bigger, so that's good as well. And then there's bonus actions being actually under their own header in the stat block. Before, you would have actions, reactions, and legendary actions, and then bonus actions for some arbitrary reason would be stuffed over under the general properties of the creature. Personally, I've always just already taken bonus actions and clipped them out of the description section of the stat block and put them under their own header, because it just makes a whole lot of sense. And then finally we land at what I think is the biggest issue with the changes that they're making to the stat blocks, or at least what I think is the most controversial part of the changes, and that is spellcasting. Now this is something that they have tried out in a few of the most recent books, where they will have moved the spellcasting ability, which used to hover above actions, so in the description part of the creature, and they've moved that down to the actions part of the creature. They've also done it so that all creatures, instead of having spell slots, which is something they used to do, now just have a more limited spell list, which can cast maybe once per day. They'll have 2 or 3 spells they can cast, and a few more times per day, and then some at-will spells. So we get smaller spell lists that are more easier to figure out and handle for the DM. So that part of the change is something I really like, something I've been doing myself. You don't want a spellcaster or spellcasting creature with 20 spells to cast and different spell slots. It's just too much to keep track of. It makes it incredibly hard to run. But now we get into an issue. The first issue I have is that putting the spell list or the spellcasting feature under actions makes it so that bonus action spells and reaction spells have to go somewhere else. But then we're ending up with either more spellcasting features, or we have to write out the shield spell and the counter spell and so on every time we include it. By doing it this way, where we both move it down and then have to separate it further into bonus action reactions, we might as well just scrap the spellcasting ability feature entirely and then have Fireball and Firebolt listed under actions, have shield under reaction, and have Misty Step under bonus action, for example, and then write out every spell the creature can cast, because that's almost what we end up doing anyway. And that's because of the other change they've made, where they say that these spell lists will now feature non-combat spells or focus on non-combat spells, while the creature's most prevalent use of a spell, their Fireball, their Firebolt, and so on, will be put in as features in the creature's stat block. And this is where everything goes off the rails for me personally, because this is just, it's not very kind to the game existing rules. And that's of course because of counterspell is one reason, where you have a Fireball looking feature that is essentially Fireball. It's completely a Fireball actually, but now it's not possible to counterspell it because it isn't a spell. I don't understand making that change. I don't understand giving the creature that feature. Now, if you have a problem with counterspell, and there are certainly several problems with counterspell, it's a hugely controversial spell and something that I might do a video on. But if you have a problem with counterspell, making it more arbitrary or weirder or situational isn't the solution. Doing it so that the players will be like, okay, yeah, I'll like to counter that spell, and they'll say, oh, this isn't a spell, this is the War Mage's Fury Ball feature. It's not a Fireball, it's a Fury Ball, and of course that is essentially Fireball, but you can't counter it. What about the Paladins, the Oath of the Ancients, which reduces damage from spells? Would it not reduce the damage from that type of Fireball, and so on? So for me, this is just this is a weird change to make, and I think I would hope that they instead had just written out the spells with Fireball 3 times per day, and then make it clear that it is a spell. That is something that I personally do sometimes when we put out monster stat blocks, especially if they have some important spells that aren't too long to write out. I'd much rather have that, or not have spellcasting feature on it at all, and then only have these spell descriptions of the 2, 3, 5 most important spells the creature can cast. And that brings me to the other point about only or focusing on non-combat spells. That's a change I don't like, because when you're looking at the stat block at the table, the non-combat spells aren't really that important. Most likely you're running this creature in combat, and you don't want to know that it can cast Speak with Death or some other out of combat spell, Detect Magic. You want to know that it can cast Fireball, Firebolt, Misty Step, those kind of spells. So yeah, I like that they're limiting the spell choices. I like that they are trying to figure out how to make it easier to run, and I think they're making some good strides. Limited uses, no spell slots, more limited lists, and so on. Writing out spells, but I don't like that they're writing them out and converting them to these weird class features instead of just writing the spell name and keep it as a spell. And I don't like that they want to put more non-combat stuff on the creature stat block. So yeah, that's my 5 cents on the stat block changes. And if you have some different thoughts, or you think I'm wrong, or there's something that I've overlooked, please let me know in the comments below. And if you like what we're doing here, you can like and subscribe the video. You can support us over at patreon.com/Eventyr, where we are putting out weekly 5e content for all of our patrons. And beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.